Good morning. Today, I want to talk to you, um, especially to those people who take on the role of leadership, because I feel as though sometimes people get leadership twisted. It seems as though the quintessential leader today is catered to, is served, and that's just in ministry in particular an oxymoron. The lessons that were really taught by Jesus, the way that Jesus ministered, the way that Jesus led, was not by way of being served, but rather in service to those he came in contact with. And no story, I believe, really hits the nail on the head or really makes the point than John 13, where after eating a meal, Jesus begins to shed his outer robes, and he puts on, as the word says, the towel of a servant. And he fills a basin with water, and he begins to wash the disciples' feet. And as he begins to wash the disciples' feet, he gets to Peter, and Peter says, "Lord, you wash my feet?" And he tells Peter, "You don't understand yet what I'm doing, but this is something I need to do," basically. And Peter tells him, "Lord, you'll never wash my feet." He says, "If I don't wash you, you can't take part in what I'm doing. You won't have a part with me." And so Peter, in his zeal, tells him, "Well, then, Lord, wash my head and my hands as well." And he tells Peter, "Peter, you're clean. A person who is bathed is clean all over and doesn't need anything washed except his feet." And of course, he makes mention that not all of them were clean. Speaking of Judas Iscariot, who had given in to the temptation of having Jesus turned over to the Pharisees to be crucified. And then Jesus tells him, after he finishes washing the disciples' feet, that what he has done is something that they need to do as well. He says, "You call me master and teacher." And that's right, because that's what I am. And what I've done is giving you an example, because as I have washed your feet, so too should you wash one another's feet. Now, this is not saying that we should necessarily physically wash one another's feet as leaders, but when you look at what he really did, what Jesus really did, as far as washing the disciples' feet, it was speaking of a spiritual cleansing more than anything, making sure that they were completely clean spiritually. And in this day and age, there's a lot of ways that we can make sure one another is spiritually clean. We can pray for one another. We can encourage one another's hearts. We can give one another good counsel. All of these things essentially is, in essence, washing one another's feet, being of help to one another, supplying need where need arises. All of these things. You see, instead of being leaders waiting on somebody to serve us, thinking that we're special because we bring a good word or we run a ministry or whatever the case may be, our approach always should be What can I do for those under me? What can I do for those that I am in charge over? What can I do for the congregation? What can I do for the neighborhood? What can I do for the region that I'm in? What can I do for the town that I'm in, for the state that I'm in, for the country that I'm in? Not wondering so much what can they all do for me, because after all, we are the leaders. And at times we have to do what Jesus did. At times we have to put on a servant's towel. At times we have to put on the form of a servant to do more for somebody else than we expect them to do for us, because after all, our job is to be as Christ-like as humanly possible. It's not a step down to serve your people. It's not demeaning or degrading yourself to be a servant to those who you're in charge over, but rather it's a badge of honor and humility to take yourself to a place where you can serve those that are around you, refreshing your people, making sure they're spiritually clean, making sure they're spiritually sound in their thinking, making sure that their needs are being met, making sure their hearts are encouraged, making sure they're tended to and they're prayed over when they're sick. All of these things are, spiritually speaking, a form of washing your people's feet. All of these things are things that Jesus did as he ministered to his people. If your goal is to be the best possible leader you can, if your goal is to be as Christ-like as you can, I advise you to take the lesson that Christ gave in this particular biblical account. Not story as if fiction, but biblical account as facts, as truth. We have to learn to take care of one another. We have to learn to be accountable for one another in positive ways. We have to learn to encourage, to inspire, to uplift one another. To not only be accountable to, but be accountable for one another, so that we can lift each other up, so that we can all come into the fullness of the knowledge of who Christ is, to make sure that we all know and share out information that will help us to come into a better relationship with Christ, to be re-encouraged when our spirits are down, to be uplifted when we feel like the world is crashing down around us, because the quintessential truth about it all is we're going to all hit those moments where you feel like life has hit rock bottom. We're going to have those times where we feel like life is going hell west and crooked, and we don't know what to do. We don't know how to get through. We're going to have those lapses in faith where we don't feel like God is really right there with us, and maybe he's just not answering prayers right now, or maybe he's just not hearing me. So in those times, it is our job to refresh one another. It's our job to wash one another's feet, to make sure that we're covered, that we're spiritually sound, that we're spiritually clean, that we're in the right frame of mind. So take this lesson. Wash some feet today. Put on a servant's towel today. Don't be humiliated. Don't feel as though you're taking a step down. Don't feel as though you're beneath your station, because the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And if you want to be first, you must make yourself last. You must humble yourself so God can exalt you. And you have to humble yourself in the mindset of humbling yourself for the sake of being humble and doing the right thing, not just so you can be exalted. If your whole goal is to be lifted up, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Humble yourself because you know that's what Jesus would do. Humble yourself because it's the right thing to do. Put on a servant's towel because that's the way you feel God is leading you. And watch how naturally you're exalted in due season when you're doing things the right way for the right reasons at the right time. I pray this message is an encouragement to you. I hope it brings you into a place of greater thoughts concerning what it is to be a leader, concerning what it is to serve your people, to serve God's people. Recognize and understand we're really no different than anybody else. We just have the responsibility of serving God's people at a greater capacity. There's no greater responsibility, there's no greater privilege than being charged with the responsibility of God's people. And I pray that you put on a servant's towel and you serve well, so that in due season God can look at you and say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things, so I'll make you ruler over many. God bless and have a great day.